The fluorescent light above the counter has been flickering for 10 minutes. Nobody's fixed it. You're standing at a laminate desk in a Dallas County clerk's office, and the woman across from you is already looking back at her screen. She slid the paper toward you 2 seconds ago. For her, this is request 41 of the day. She's already moved on. You haven't picked it up yet. There's an address printed at the top, an apartment on a specific street in Oak Cliff, in the part of Dallas your father moved to the year your parents divorced. You've known that address since you were 18 years old. Your father said your name and that address in the same sentence so many times you stopped hearing it as information. It became part of how he ended phone calls. It became part of how you planned. You pick up the page. Your eyes find the column marked current owner. The name there is not yours. It's not your father's either. You look at the bottom right corner. The line marked date of transfer, February 14th, 2021, Valentine's Day. 3 years, 3 weeks, and 2 days before he died. You read it again. The light above you keeps flickering. The woman is typing something unrelated to you. The parking lot outside the window is doing nothing in particular. Everything around you is continuing as if nothing has shifted, as if the page in your hand doesn't say what it says. You don't move. There is nothing obvious to do with your hands. The deed was one piece of paper, but it wasn't the only document that was going to matter. There was something else, something Ray Chen had filled out 14 years earlier, and apparently never thought about again. That's where this story turns. It was March 28th, 2024, a Thursday, 2:11 in the afternoon. Loretta Chen had driven to the county clerk's office because her probate attorney suggested it almost as an afterthought, at the end of a meeting, the way someone mentions a small errand on the way out. Just run a title search on the apartment. Confirm it's in the estate. It was supposed to take 20 minutes and tell her nothing she didn't already know. It wasn't. Nothing about that Thursday looked like a threshold. The sky was flat and gray. There was a drive-through coffee place visible from the parking lot. Someone had taped a paper sign to the door saying the elevator was out of service. An ordinary day, dressed in ordinary clothes. That's always the design. This is the story of a woman who spent 11 years believing a promise that had already been quietly revoked by the time she finished believing it. It's about what was taken, how precisely it was taken, and what Loretta found when she started reading the paperwork more carefully than anyone had planned for. There is one detail in this story that changes everything else around it. You'll recognize it when you get there, not because it's dramatic, but because of what it reveals about the timing. The difference between a bad decision and a calculated one isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's in the date on a document. If you stay for stories where the math ends up saying things the words wouldn't, this channel is where those go. Subscribe if you haven't already. This one has layers. Here's the shape of it. A man made the same promise to his daughter for 11 years. He revoked it without telling her. And the thing that eventually paid her back wasn't a lawsuit. It was a form he filled out the year everything fell apart, and apparently never remembered to change. We'll get there. First, you need to understand what 11 years of a promise actually looks like. Ray Chen was 37 years old in 2003, the year his marriage ended, and the year he moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Oak Cliff, Dallas. Loretta was 9. She stayed in Fort Worth with her mother. 41 miles on the highway. Nothing on a map. A different country at that age. Ray worked as a structural estimator for a mid-sized construction firm. His job was to look at a building or a project and produce a number within a margin of a few percent of what it would cost to construct or dismantle. He was accurate at work. He was less so at showing up. Visits settled into every other weekend, then once a month, then holidays and phone calls. The phone calls, at least, kept happening, and somewhere in every birthday call, between asking how her design work was going and promising to come see her studio soon, he said the same thing. The apartment's yours when I'm gone. You know that. The first time he said it, Loretta was 18. It landed as warmth, not information. By 22, she'd started to take it seriously. By 25, she'd built a background assumption around it, not a written plan, just a shape she'd stopped questioning. She didn't take on debt to buy property in Dallas. She kept her rent modest in Fort Worth. She turned down a long-term contract that would have made sense if she'd been willing to commit to another city. The apartment wasn't a sure thing, but it was a direction, and she was building toward it. That's worth sitting with for a moment, what it costs to believe in a promise over 11 years. Not the money that went somewhere else, the decisions that didn't get made because one seemed already decided. He gave her a key the summer she turned 24. It wasn't a ceremony. He pressed a brass key into her palm during a Sunday afternoon visit, cut at a hardware store, a strip of masking tape on the bowl, with the Oak Cliff address written in his handwriting. He said, "So you always have a home to come back to." She threaded it onto her keychain that same afternoon, next to her car key and her office badge. After a few months, she stopped consciously noticing it. It was just there, the way things become when you've decided they belong. That key is still on her keychain right now. She has picked it up with the intention of removing it. She's put it back down every time. By the end of this story, you'll understand why, and why it's the only thing that couldn't be taken. In August of 2020, he mailed her a birthday card, not a text, a physical card, handwritten. The card said, "This apartment is your security. Never forget that. Love, Dad." She kept it in a folder with her tax documents. She still has it. The relationship had imperfections, as real ones do. Ray compensated for absence with intensity. Calls packed with warmth that then went quiet for weeks. There was one Christmas he hadn't called at all and explained it vaguely, weeks later, through something he'd been managing that he couldn't quite name. She forgave him. It had become its own habit. Then, in the fall of 2019, he met Debra. Debra was 52, recently retired from a school district administrative role. She moved into the Oak Cliff apartment within 8 months. They married in April 2020. Loretta attended, gave a toast, smiled for the photos, drove home. And after the wedding, something small changed. Ray stopped suggesting visits to the apartment. Before Debra, it was routine. "Next time you're in Dallas, come by, I'll cook something." After the wedding, those invitations simply stopped appearing. Once in the summer of 2020, Loretta mentioned she was thinking about a longer contract in Dallas, maybe finally making the move she'd been considering. Ray said that's great and immediately changed the subject to something else. She noticed. She filed it under adjustment: a new wife, a shared space, logistics. It made sense on the surface. But here's what's strange. In the 12 months after that wedding, Ray became more insistent about reassuring Loretta than he had been in years. Not less, more. The birthday card in August 2020. A November call where he brought up the apartment unprompted. January 2021, her birthday, same thing. He said it 3 times in 6 months, and then something happened in February that explains exactly why. He gave her the reassurance while he was preparing the transfer. He mentioned the apartment in November 2020. He said it again on her birthday in January 2021. He signed it over on February 14th. The reassurance and the plan were running simultaneously, in the same voice, over the same phone line. That's not grief, and it's not confusion. That is a man who understood the gap between what he was saying and what he was doing, and made a specific calculation about what his daughter would or wouldn't go looking for. What he hadn't calculated was what she'd find when she did. Ray Chen died on March 7th, 2024. He was 58. A heart attack, overnight. No prior diagnosis that had been communicated to Loretta. Debra called at 6:17 in the morning. Grief compresses time in a specific way. The first 2 weeks disappear. The third feels longer than a month. Loretta handled what needed to be handled. Arrangements, calls, documents placed in front of her by people speaking in careful voices. In the third week, a probate attorney named Patricia entered the picture. Methodical, soft-spoken. At the end of their first meeting, she mentioned the title search as if it were a formality. It was not. Loretta walked into the county clerk's office at 2:11 on a Thursday afternoon. The result came back in 11 minutes. Stop here for a moment, because what the title search found isn't just a fact about the apartment. It's the first piece of a pattern, and the pattern only becomes visible once you know the second piece. Hold that. Here's the first one. The Oak Cliff apartment had been transferred out of Ray Chen's name on February 14th, 2021, Valentine's Day. Let that land before continuing. 9 months after the wedding. 6 months after the birthday card that said this apartment is your security. 3 years before he died. Receiving party, Debra Chen. Method, gift deed. Consideration paid, 0. There was a signature, a notary stamp, and a date, chosen or not, that made it the kind of detail no one forgets once they've seen it. He had reassured her about the apartment in November 2020. He had said it again on her birthday in January 2021. He signed it over on February 14th. Patricia asked from the parking lot, "Did your father ever ask you for money specifically connected to that apartment?" Loretta's hand tightened on the phone. She already knew the answer. She needed 1 more second before she said it, because there was a second transaction. 4 months after the transfer, Ray Chen picked up the phone. And what he said on that call is the piece that turns this from a painful estate story into something with a specific name under Texas civil law. Here is what Ray Chen did in June 2021, while the Oak Cliff property was already registered in Debra's name. He called Loretta. He said the building's HVAC system needed full replacement. He said the cost was being split between tenants and management per the lease terms. He said his share came to $9,400. He didn't pick that number randomly. A structural estimator knows how to work with figures. $9,400 is the kind of quote that sounds like it came from a contractor, specific enough to be credible, rounded at the 100 to sound like a final invoice. Not 9,000 even, which sounds like a ballpark. Not 9,200 or 9,600, which sounds like a different kind of precision. 9,400 sounds like a man who got the bill, looked at it, and called his daughter. He sounded tired and specific, exactly like a father who needed help and had run out of other options. He had no lease. He hadn't had a landlord since 2003. He'd owned the apartment outright, and as of February 14th, he didn't own it at all. He called her about repairs on a building his wife had owned for 4 months. He knew that when he picked up the phone. He knew it when he quoted her the exact number. He knew it when the first wire cleared. More than 2 months of Loretta's rent in Fort Worth at the time. Money she had been building carefully, in the margins of a freelance design career she was constructing, without the financial floor she'd been told was underneath her. She wired $4,700 on June 11th. She wired another $4,700 on June 18th. She didn't ask for a receipt because people don't ask their fathers for documentation. The call required a specific sequence. Transfer the asset. Wait 4 months. Call with a story that only works if the other person doesn't know the first transaction occurred. Accept the money. Say nothing afterward. Every step depended on the one before it. He had underestimated her. That would matter more than he'd planned for. Loretta called Debra 3 days after the parking lot. She kept notes. She asked questions in a specific order. Debra said Ray had wanted her protected. She was older. She was newly retired. He worried about what would happen to her if he died first. He felt Loretta was young, had her career, had time, and he didn't want to leave his wife with nothing. Loretta asked about the $9,400. Debra said she hadn't been involved in Ray's individual financial decisions. She said it quietly, without asking what Loretta was referring to. The birthday card from August 2020 was in the folder. "This apartment is your security. Never forget that." He had written those words while the transfer was either forming or already decided. The reassurance wasn't a separate impulse. It was running on the same calendar as the plan, in the same handwriting, toward the same person. He transferred the apartment while she still believed the promise. He called her for money to repair a building he no longer owned. He died without telling her either thing had happened. 3 separate acts, each built on the previous one. And Debra's explanation has an internal coherence, as justifications go. You can follow the logic, even if you don't accept it. A man protects his wife. His daughter is young. She has time, but the justification has a gap. It explains the deed. It has nothing to say about June. There is no version of estate planning that involves calling your daughter about repairs on a property you've already given away. That specific act, the call, the number, the story about the lease, only functions as a transaction if Loretta stays uninformed about the first transaction. The justification covers the transfer. It cannot cover the phone call. And that gap, between what the explanation covers and what it doesn't, is exactly where the civil fraud standard lives under Texas law. Loretta closed her notes. She called Patricia back. She wasn't crying. She'd already done that. What she felt now was something different, the particular quality of focus that arrives when a person stops processing what happened and starts thinking about what comes next. Patricia laid out the legal landscape without softening it. The apartment transfer was almost certainly beyond reach. A gift deed between spouses, properly executed, notarized, and recorded in 2021, 3 years old by the time Ray died, was legal in Texas, regardless of what had been promised verbally to a third party. Loretta had no written contract, no lien, no deed in her name. What she had was a key, 11 years of phone calls, and a birthday card. What does Texas law say about 11 years of verbal promises regarding real property? Nothing that helps Loretta. That door was closed, and Patricia said so plainly. The $9,400 was a different matter. Obtaining money through material misrepresentation, specifically presenting a false need for funds when that need cannot exist given facts the caller already knows, meets the standard for civil fraud in Texas. To pursue it, Patricia needed 3 things: evidence the apartment had already been transferred before the HVAC call, evidence no repairs were actually performed, and evidence of the wire transfers. The first and third were already documented. Step 1, a formal records request to the building's property management company, asking for all maintenance entries on the unit in calendar year 2021. Step 2, Loretta pulled her bank records, organized them by date, forwarded them to Patricia with a cover note. June 11th, $4,700 outgoing wire. June 18th, $4,700 outgoing wire. Timestamps intact. Receiving account documented. Step 3, wait for the property management response. While they waited, Debra's attorney made contact. The offer arrived in a letter that used the phrase amicable resolution 3 times across 4 pages. The settlement figure was $4,000. The letter described the $9,400 as an informal loan arrangement. It came packaged with a full release of all claims contingent on Loretta's signature by a specified date. Loretta looked at that number for a long time. $4,000. Less than what she'd wired. A check she could deposit that week. She could be done. No more hearings, no more folders, no more calls with Patricia that cost her billable hours she was tracking in a separate spreadsheet. The paperwork, the grief, the open laptop tab labeled Dad, all of it could close. She was 30 years old. She was tired. $4,000 was a real number in a real account, and the alternative was a process with no guaranteed outcome. She called Patricia and said she was thinking about accepting. Patricia said, Give me 48 hours before you sign anything. There was something in the way she said it, not urgent, just precise, that made Loretta set the letter face down on the kitchen table. She went to make coffee. She stood at the counter longer than it took the coffee to brew. She told Patricia she'd wait 48 hours. And what Patricia found in those 48 hours is the reason Loretta never signed that letter, and the reason $4,000 became $31,500. Picture the 48 hours between that phone call and Patricia's callback. You have a letter on your kitchen table, face down, because you couldn't stand looking at the number on it. You go to work on a freelance project. You answer emails. You have a lease renewal form on your desk that you've been sitting on for 6 weeks because every administrative task in your life feels like it's happening through glass. You open the folder labeled Dad for a legal reason. You see the birthday card, August 2020, handwritten. You close the folder again. You make dinner. You eat at the counter because the table has the letter on it. You think about the apartment. 3rd floor, corner unit, east-facing window. You think about driving past it in a few years. You think about what it will feel like to know a building by its address and not be able to go in. You think about $4,000 versus what you wired. You do the math, the way you've been doing it for weeks, in different configurations, as if the answer will eventually change. You go to sleep. You wake up at 3 a.m. with a specific thought you can't quite place. Something about the sequence of things. About November and January and February. About a man who knew what he'd signed and called you anyway 4 months later. You don't go back to sleep. On hour 41, your phone rings. It's Patricia. She says, "I need you to sit down." You're already sitting. The property management records had arrived. The Oak Cliff building maintained maintenance logs for each unit, filed by date and type of work. Patricia had requested every entry for Ray's unit in calendar year 2021. The response was clean and specific. No HVAC replacement. No permits pulled with the city of Dallas. No licensed contractor submitted an invoice for that address during that year. No work order, no inspection, no mechanical intervention of any kind recorded. The only logged maintenance for the unit in all of 2021 was a plumbing issue in October, a minor repair billed to the unit's current owner, which was Debra. The October 2021 maintenance ledger already listed Debra Chen as the unit's owner, not buried in county records, but in routine building paperwork 8 months after Valentine's Day. The building knew. The management company knew. The maintenance log knew. Ray had described himself as a tenant with a landlord, and a lease and a cost-sharing arrangement. Every element of that call was constructed for someone who had no reason to go looking. Patricia filed the small claims case. Then, at the end of their next call, she asked Loretta something she hadn't prepared for. "Did your father ever mention a retirement account? A 401k through his employer? Maybe from a long time ago?" He had. Vaguely, once, Loretta thought it was a call in 2018 or 2019, one of those conversations that covered everything loosely and nothing specifically. Something about a plan through the construction firm opened when he was in his mid-30s. She'd never thought about it again. Patricia filed a financial disclosure request in the probate proceedings. Stop here. What came back from that filing doesn't just change the outcome of this case. It changes the entire shape of the story you've been hearing, because it means something was protecting Loretta this whole time, without anyone deciding that it should. Here's what the filing found. Ray Chen had opened a 401k in 2009, the year of the divorce, the year he moved into the Oak Cliff apartment, the year Loretta was 15, and the distance between them was 41 miles, and every other weekend and phone calls that were getting shorter. He had opened that account at 37. At the same moment his life was rearranging itself, in the same year he moved into the apartment he would later promise his daughter, and he had written a name in the beneficiary field. Loretta's name. Give that a second. The account had carried that name for 14 years. through Debra moving in, through the wedding Loretta had smiled through the birthday card in August 2020, through February 14th, 2021, through June when he called about the HVAC, through every birthday call and every version of the same promise. The beneficiary form said the same thing it had always said, in the only language that can't be revised over a phone call. Balance at time of Ray Chen's death, March 7th, 2024, $31,000 even. Named beneficiary, Loretta Chen, unchanged since 2009. Loretta didn't call Patricia back right away. She sat with her phone and looked out the window at a street doing ordinary things in the afternoon. 14 years. The account had been there the whole time, carrying her name through everything. Under the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, federal law, a named beneficiary designation on a retirement account supersedes a will, a probate filing, and a surviving spouse's claim. The designation is a binding contract between the account holder and the plan custodian. It does not pass through probate. It does not require court approval. It transfers to the named individual because the named individual is on the form. Federal law doesn't ask what the deceased intended in the last 3 years of his life. It asks what the form says. Think about what that means in practice. A person can sign over a property. They can revise a will. They can say different things to different people. But a beneficiary designation on a retirement account sits in a filing system and waits. It doesn't know about the wedding. It doesn't know about the gift deed. It doesn't know about the birthday card or the HVAC call. It just holds the name that was written in it and waits for the question to be asked. The form said, Loretta. Debra had filed a competing claim with the account custodian. She had not disclosed Loretta's beneficiary designation in the probate inventory, which was a sworn document filed with the court, and that omission carried a specific name under Texas law. The custodian placed a hold on the account and initiated a formal review. Loretta called Patricia and said she was not signing the settlement. Patricia said, I know. The small claims hearing was set for August. Debra did not file a counterclaim, did not request a continuance. 22 days before the hearing date, a cashier's check arrived at Patricia's office. $9,400. No letter, no explanation, a return address, and silence. Debra knew what the maintenance record said. She knew what they would say in a courtroom. She sent a check without any accompanying words because choosing words would have meant choosing which words to use about what the check was for. The silence was its own answer. Loretta deposited it on a Friday afternoon and sat in her car in the bank parking lot for a few minutes without driving anywhere. An unremarkable lot. Pharmacy on the left, dry cleaner on the right. She didn't feel like she'd won anything. She felt like she was done. The 401k took 11 weeks to process. Debra's competing beneficiary claim was reviewed and formally rejected in late September. The distribution cleared in October, $31,000, minus the mandatory 10% early withdrawal penalty and applicable federal income tax withholding. Net deposit to Loretta's account, $22,100. Total recovery, $9,400 from the fraud settlement, $22,100 from the 401k distribution, $31,500. Not the apartment. Not 11 years of decisions built around a promise. But $31,500 more than anyone in that transaction had planned for her to have, arriving through a document that Ray had filled out the same year he bought the apartment, and apparently never went back to change. Ray Chen transferred the Oak Cliff apartment on Valentine's Day, 2021, to protect someone's financial future. He forgot about the account he had opened in 2009. That account, completed at 37, in the year his marriage ended, and he moved into the apartment and his daughter was 15, and the shape of everything was rearranging itself, had carried Loretta's name through every decision he made afterward. Through the wedding, through the gift deed, through the June phone call. It sat in a file somewhere, saying what it had always said, while everything else moved around it. The instrument of her recovery was created 14 years before the instrument of her loss. He built one thing that protected her. Then he built something that didn't. The first thing outlasted the second. Whether that was intention, negligence, or the particular oversight of a man who didn't expect to die at 58, Loretta can't know. She's thought about it. She hasn't resolved it. The key is still on her keychain. Brass, masking tape on the bow, the handwritten address nearly faded. It opens a door to an apartment that belongs to someone she has never spoken to. She carried it through the probate hearings, through the October morning the 401k distribution cleared, through her 30th birthday when the phone didn't ring. She hasn't taken it off the ring. That key had nothing to do with the legal recovery. But it's the one thing from the 11 years that nobody signed over. He could transfer the apartment. He couldn't transfer the key he pressed into her palm on a Sunday afternoon in 2018. It was hers because he gave it to her, and there is no deed for that. He protected Debra with the apartment. He'd been protecting Loretta with the 401k since 2009, without, apparently, knowing which one would count. Loretta turned 30 in September. Her birthday came and went without a phone call, the first time since she was 9 years old. She'd understood intellectually that this was coming. She wasn't prepared for it anyway. There's no preparation for the specific absence of something that was reliable, even when it was imperfect, even when it arrived late, even when it ended with "I'll call you back this week," and sometimes he did. The card from August 2020 is still in her tax folder. She has picked it up with the intention of throwing it away and put it back down. It's his handwriting. That doesn't come back. She passes the Oak Cliff building occasionally when she has work in that part of Dallas. 3rd floor, corner unit, east-facing window. She hasn't been inside since Debra moved in. Ray had stopped inviting her, gradually, the way invitations stop when someone has already decided something about the space that makes the invitation complicated. She looked up the Zillow estimate once. $94,000. The kind of asset that determines whether you spend your 40s building equity or building rent history. Not a windfall, but a floor. A different starting point. The $9,400 Ray had called about was almost exactly 10% of that figure. She noticed the proportion and hasn't decided what to do with the noticing. Her total recovery was $31,500. That number represents what was provable, what was documented, what the law could reach. It doesn't represent 11 years of trusting an address instead of buying one. It doesn't represent the particular ease of believing there was a floor under you. It doesn't represent the calls that won't happen now, because the person who owed them can't make them anymore, and the debt died with him. She doesn't frame any of this as victimhood. She is 30 years old. She built a design career without the apartment. She has a lease she renewed in November, bank records that proved what needed to be proved, and a probate filing that corroborates it. She says she's doing fine. She mostly means it. Here is what the county records show. Ray Chen transferred an apartment he had promised his daughter for 11 years to his wife of 9 months on February 14, 2021, without telling his daughter. 4 months later, he called her with a story about HVAC repairs on a property he no longer owned and asked for $9,400, a number chosen to sound like a contractor invoice, specific enough for credibility, clean enough to remember. She wired it in 2 transfers over 7 days because he was her father, and people don't ask their fathers for documentation. He died on March 7, 2024. She found out standing at a laminate counter in a Dallas County clerk's office on a Thursday afternoon in March, holding a printout with a date she won't forget. She recovered $31,500. She still has the key. There is a brass key on Loretta's keychain, cut at a hardware store, a strip of masking tape with an address written in handwriting that's nearly gone, that opens a door to an apartment that belongs to no one who loves her. She carried it through the funeral, through the county clerk's office, through the property management records and the 401k review, and the morning the distribution cleared, through her 30th birthday, through every drive past the third-floor window. She hasn't taken it off. Maybe the key stays because it's the one thing he gave her that couldn't be transferred away. He could sign the apartment over. He couldn't sign over the key. It's a small distinction. It's also the only one that holds. He protected Debra with the apartment. He'd been protecting Loretta with the 401k since 2009. He just didn't know which one would count. She does now.